Finally, it appears we may be getting something in the WNBA that some of us have been longing and calling for. We know the referees were an absolute joke in this league. They were awful. They didn't call any fouls. You had people getting their nose busted open, blood all over the floor with no whistles being blown. We watched Caitlin Clark get the living life beat out of her every game, being targeted and not getting any foul calls. The girl can't get to the free throw line to save her life because they refuse to call fouls for her. And it appears, shout out to Rachel Demita. She had Annie Costable on. I recommend all of you go watch this interview at full length. Annie Costable addressed that the players in the WNBA is looking to bring in new referees, more qualified referees.
The WNBA just announced they're bringing in new referees after 2 full years of watching Caitlin Clark get absolutely mauled on the court with no whistle. We're talking blood on the floor, busted noses, non-stop body checks, and the league's biggest star still couldn't buy a foul call. Now, suddenly, they've decided that hiring qualified officials might actually be a good idea. This bombshell was dropped by Annie Costabile on Rachel Dida's show, and honestly, it's about time someone exposed the complete circus that's been passing for officiating in this league. So before we break it all down, let me ask you this. Do you think the WNBA only decided to fix their referee problem because Caitlin Clark brought in millions of new fans who finally started paying attention? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Biggest thing, just as far as the product on the floor, because a lot of people talk about physicality, a lot of people talk about the referees. I actually did a deep dive in one of my episodes talking about like who the referees are calling to, essentially, and where the W gets their referees. But as far as the product, because at the end of the day, fans are not going to stick around if it's not a good product. Period.
Right.
Like, they have to be there for the basketball, and I think a lot of casual fans got pulled into the W because Caitlin had such a different game that was like just very, very exciting to watch, and she's an incredible player. So they're there now. They're seeing this product. They're like, oh, this is cool. There's other players that I'm like getting super invested in. But a lot of people have called out like physicality, referees. Have you heard anything from players, owners, like any of your sources about them actively working on improving the product?
What do you think is the biggest issue with the product on the floor right now? Because a lot of people talk about physicality and a lot of people point to the referees. I actually did a deep dive in one of my episodes, breaking down who these referees are, who they're calling games for, and where the WNBA even gets their officials. But at the end of the day, if the product isn't good, fans are not going to stick around, period. People have to fall in love with the basketball itself. And I think a huge wave of casual fans got pulled into the W because Caitlin Clark's game is just different. It's electric. It's exciting. She's must-see TV. Now those fans are here. They're watching. They're discovering other players. They're getting emotionally invested. They're saying, wait, this is actually dope. But at the same time, more and more people are calling out the over-physical play, the officiating, and the inconsistency. So I'm curious, have you heard anything from players, team owners, or league sources about the WNBA actively working behind the scenes to improve the product on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, officiating, like, I know everyone thinks, like, this is all about Caitlin and the way Caitlin is officiated. Across the league, coaches, like, this has been an issue. Like, go back.
We saw Coach Cheryl Reeve crash out.
Cheryl Reeve is the crash out queen.
Over the officiating. Yeah, it was like one of the best crash outs ever.
Like, go back to, God, like Candace's rookie year. There's a game she gets laid out, like, and multiple. Like, go back to all of these players. It's crazy what they all went through. And so obviously there are more eyes on the league. So there's the way that the physicality around Caitlin was obviously layered in the sense of, like, she's this phenom coming into the league, like, everyone's talking about her. So we've got all these vets who, again, it's the same when Candace came into the league, when Diana, when there's a generational player that comes into the league, and it's in men's sports too, the messaging is, okay, this is our league, like, welcome, you know? It's like, and so I think across the league.
All right, let's start with the obvious. The officiating in the WNBA has been an absolute joke for years. This isn't some brand new problem that magically appeared when Caitlin Clark entered the league. Go back and watch games from Candace Parker's rookie season or Diana Taurasi's early years. The pattern is the same. Every generation's biggest stars came in and got beat up night after night, while referees just stood there with their whistles in their pockets. But here's the real truth: nobody cared, because nobody was watching. For years, the WNBA could get away with terrible officiating because the casual fan base simply wasn't there to call it out. No pressure, no spotlight, no accountability. Then Caitlin Clark shows up. She brings millions of new fans, millions of new eyeballs, and suddenly people who have never watched women's basketball before are tuning in, and they're asking the same question over and over. Why is that girl getting tackled with no foul call? And that's when everything changed.
Our coaches, player, like this has been an issue. And in that respect, I think the attention on the league now is forcing the league's hand, because all these years that they've been like, yeah, we're doing enough. Like, again, we've been asking in press conferences for years, like, what's up with this playing, right? And so now, again, the microscope is so fixated on the league that they have to answer these questions and they have to do better. And so, yes, the officiating has been a problem. It was a problem. It will continue to be a problem until they treat the hiring of these officials as, again, the same way they treat the players in terms of making this like a lucrative place to be. You can't expect the best officiating if the salary structure is not great, if the way you're pooling these officials is like not great. There's so many institutional issues and have been with the officiating. There's a committee now that has been put together. The competition meetings, they spoke about the officiating committee. That's something that I've got to double back on and see how.
Annie Costabile went on Rachel Dida's Courtside Club show and basically confirmed what everyone already knew. The WNBA is finally being forced to confront its officiating problem. There's now an official committee reviewing the situation, and they're actively discussing bringing in more qualified referees. She made one thing crystal clear: this hasn't just been a Caitlin Clark issue. It's been a league-wide problem for years. But she also admitted something even more telling: the intense spotlight created by Caitlin Clark's popularity is what's truly forcing the WNBA's hand. With millions of new fans watching every game, the league can no longer ignore what's happening on the court. The pressure is real. The criticism is loud. And for the first time in a long time, accountability is unavoidable.
Simple call to make. Where are we going so wrong?
Yeah, where's the disconnect?
Right. And it brings me back to that game against the Fever and the Sun. And again, the fact that there was, even within that game, there was no consistency with the calls. And like Marina checking Caitlin to the floor, like we can laugh. Like Marina is a crash out queen, and I have the utmost respect for Marina, and I've covered her. I think her style, like her aggressiveness, I really love that, because that's kind of like how I am in my real life. I'm a very like aggressive person, but like to not call these things appropriately, she should have been kicked. Like that should have been, and that should have been the end.
When you really think about it, it's actually hilarious and kind of embarrassing. The league has known the officiating was terrible for over a decade. Players have been complaining. Coaches have been getting ejected for calling out blown calls. Cheryl Reeve even had one of the most legendary meltdowns in WNBA history over a single missed whistle. And yet, the league's response was always the same: yeah, we're doing enough. Then they just ignored the problem. But now that casual fans are finally watching and actually asking questions, suddenly officiating is a top priority. Funny how that works. So let's talk about what we actually witnessed during Caitlin Clark's rookie season, because it was genuinely insane. She was getting hit, checked, grabbed, shoved, and bodied on almost every single possession. Defenders were out there playing football, and the refs just swallowed their whistles. No matter what happened to her on the court, she couldn't buy a trip to the free throw line. And millions of new fans were watching it unfold in real time, completely stunned. And that's exactly why the league can't hide from this anymore. The Kennedy Carter incident is the perfect example of everything wrong with WNBA officiating. Carter lowered her shoulder and checked Caitlin Clark to the floor when the ball wasn't even in play. That should have been an instant flagrant foul and possibly an ejection. Instead, the refs stood there and did absolutely nothing. It only got upgraded to a flagrant after the fact, once the league office stepped in. That's not how officiating is supposed to work. Then there was Marina Mabrey checking Caitlin to the floor in that Sun versus Fever game. Annie Costabile said it herself. Marina should have been ejected. That wasn't a basketball play. It was a cheap shot. But once again, the refs swallowed their whistles and the game just moved on like nothing happened. And what made it even worse was the insane inconsistency. In the same game, refs would call tic-tac fouls on one end, then completely ignore obvious cheap shots on the other. There was no logic, no standard, no consistency. Players didn't know what was allowed and what wasn't, and that's how players get hurt. Rachel Dida made a critical point about landing space fouls. Those must be called every single time because that's how careers get derailed. You take away a shooter's landing space, and suddenly you're risking ankle injuries, knee injuries, and season-ending damage. Yet, WNBA refs miss those calls constantly. In the playoffs, Alyssa Thomas took out Nafisa Collier's ankle going for a steal. The ref said it was clean because she touched the ball. But according to the actual rulebook, if you can't get the ball without making contact that affects the player, it's a foul. Even NBA officials reviewed it and said it was clean, and they were wrong. That mistake happened because WNBA officials aren't properly trained on their own rules. Annie also exposed the salary structure for referees, and this explains everything. If you don't pay refs well and don't make officiating a desirable career, you're not attracting elite talent. You're getting whoever is willing to do the job for the money being offered. That creates a pool of officials who aren't adequately trained or experienced, and the product on the court suffers. The WNBA has been operating on a tight budget for years, cutting corners wherever possible. And officiating was one of the corners they cut. They hired refs who maybe weren't ready for this level, but were willing to work for less. And fans and players paid the price. Now enter Caitlin Clark. She brings millions of new fans. Suddenly, casual viewers are tuning in and saying, wait, is this normal? They're comparing WNBA games to NBA and college basketball, and the gap is impossible to ignore. The missed calls, the inconsistency, the lack of player protection. It all stands out when millions are watching. So now, the WNBA is being forced to act. They can't hide behind, we're doing enough anymore, not when their biggest star is getting targeted every night. The league needs Caitlin Clark healthy because she's driving ratings, ticket sales, merchandise, and mainstream attention. If she gets injured due to poor officiating, that's a massive financial disaster. What's frustrating is that this is reactive, not proactive. The league should have fixed officiating years ago when players and coaches were begging for change. Instead, they waited until it became a PR crisis. Annie talked about how an officiating committee was formed after competition meetings, but she also admitted she needs to follow up because a lot of times these committees lead to nothing. That's the WNBA in a nutshell. Big promises, limited follow-through. The physicality debate adds another layer. Annie doesn't want the women's game to become soft, and she's right. Women play on the floor, not above the rim, so physicality will always be higher. But Rachel made the perfect counterpoint. Adam Silver protects NBA superstars because he understands business. Stars get a different whistle, not because it's unfair, but because they drive revenue. The WNBA hasn't figured that out yet. Aya Wilson gets some protection because she's earned it. She's also adapted her game to draw fouls. But Caitlin Clark, as a rookie, was getting hammered nightly, and the refs refused to step in. That's terrible for growth because your biggest draw is being punished instead of protected. And this whole thing became even messier because the conversation turned tribal. When legitimate fouls weren't called on Clark, media members who never covered the WNBA made it about bullying and jealousy. That poisoned the discussion. Now, anytime someone pointed out a missed call, they were accused of being part of the Protect Caitlin crowd. But this was never about Caitlin specifically. It was about calling fouls that should be called for everyone. Kennedy Carter lowering her shoulder into someone without the ball is a foul no matter who the player is. The league allowed this problem to fester for so long that once it finally exploded, it became about one player instead of systemic failure. And that made it harder to fix. The solution isn't complicated. Pay officials better. Invest in real training. Create accountability. Protect your stars. That last part is controversial, but it's reality. Every successful sports league protects its revenue drivers. The WNBA can't afford to pretend otherwise anymore. If Caitlin Clark or any other star suffers a major injury because refs refuse to do their jobs, it could set the league back years. It's embarrassing that it took millions of new fans to force this conversation. But at least it's happening now. The only question is, will anything actually change? The 2025 season will be the test. If we see better trained officials, more consistent calls, stronger player protection, real accountability, then great. The WNBA finally got it right. But if we see the same chaos we saw in 2024, then this committee was just window dressing. So there you have it. The WNBA is finally hiring new referees after watching Caitlin Clark get targeted for 2 straight years. Whether real change happens or not remains to be seen. If you think the league only cares now because Caitlin Clark exposed how bad the officiating really is, smash that like button and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, do you believe this committee will actually fix anything, or is it just more empty talk?